Yeah. Good evening, everybody.
There you go. Jeez. It's working.
It's working, isn't it? Okay. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The board has already met in executive session, and we saluted the flag at that time. Can I have a quick roll call of those present?
Mr. Salmon?
Here.
Ms. White?
Here.
Ms. Light? Here. Ms. Hira? Here. Ms. McKeon?
Here.
Mr. Molinari?
Here.
Mr. Amin?
Here.
Mrs. Shipak?
Yes.
Mr. Braccio? Here. We have a quorum?
Okay, this is a regular meeting of the Board of Education of Berners Township. Notice of the time and the place of this meeting was provided, and copies of that resolution were forwarded to the official newspapers as designated by the Board of Education and to the Township Clerk. And a copy of the notice was posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education offices in accordance with PL 1975, Chapter 231A. The rest of the notice is posted online. It's posted in the agenda for your convenience. We're going to do the meeting in a little bit of a different order tonight to make sure that we get to the BT Connect. We're going to get through the business portion of this meeting, go through the committee reports, and at the end we're going to do public comment. To ensure that we have time to get to the BT Connect, public comment is going to have a hard stop of 8 p.m. tonight. Just two quick things before I pass it over to Mr. Markarian. A lot of interest in the health curriculum, obviously. We've gotten a lot of emails. Despite the form response, every single email has been read, and that's a topic we're going to dive deeper into in the next meeting. And on the other subject, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Markarian.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. Really great turnout for the meeting. A couple things just as FYIs. We have a setup tonight that we're trying for the first time. So we have an attempt to have a traveling ability to do live streaming so that when we do relocate our meetings in places besides the PAC, hopefully we'll have a decent live stream going on. So we're working on that tonight. We have some IT staff testing out some new equipment. This is the first time, so please bear with us. If you see any glitches at home, hopefully we'll get the bugs worked out after our first trial, and maybe tonight goes off without a hitch. So I want to just make sure you're aware of that. And we're a little more limited on microphones when we go on the road, so we're sharing here tonight. So thanks for your patience, and again, thanks for coming out with this great turnout. I see a lot of staff and administrators and members of the public. We really appreciate your coming out for our BT Connect meeting or other items. So thanks for being here tonight. I wanted to address just quickly an SOS Express that I sent out this afternoon. I understand there was some communication circulating. I'm not exactly sure, as I wrote in my SOS, because I just didn't have the time to get into it today. But there was a lot of questions that I saw in excerpts, I think, or pieces from the communication, questioning what was going on with the 23-24 budget. There were some statements in the message that I didn't think were really accurate. I tried to correct that in today's SOS Express. We are certainly in the throes of building a budget. No decisions have been made about tax levy, the amount of the tax levy. No decisions have been made about staff members, which staff members we have or we don't have or we might like to add. These are all conversations that we are in the middle of. Obviously, we haven't even made a presentation to the Board of Ed yet. That is scheduled to happen at our Finance Committee, where we will go over a draft of the budget just with the Finance Committee. Then the Finance Committee will report out. We will have a preliminary budget presentation in March, and then a public hearing on the budget in May. But I just wanted to clarify in case there's any misunderstanding out there about our budget. It has not been formulated yet. We're still finishing that first draft. Beth and I and the rest of the administrators, our goal is to get that finished to the Finance Committee for later this month. We are going to have some challenges, no doubt. I think we all live in the same town, in the same economy, in the same state, in the same country, and we can see what's going on around us, right? We know what's going on with the price of a loaf of bread, with the price of a dozen eggs, right? We know how hard it is to get labor and keep labor. You know, it's not a surprise when we look around at the challenges that we have. We are struggling with transportation. We have been for years. This has been a building storm. Anybody that's been involved in schools knows that there's been a major shortage on bus drivers that has caused serious wage inflation, contract inflation. That's going to be a big challenge in our budget this year. You know, it's understood that that's going to be a tall task for us. We are dealing with contractual renewals that people are seeking well above the 2% tax levy cap. So we know we're going to be confronted with that challenge when it comes to contract renewals. The transportation index, which is issued by the state typically around this time of the year as districts are building their budget, by law, transportation contracts can be renewed at most, not that you have to renew at this number, but at most, by the CPI that the state sets for transportation contracts, which for this year is 5.86%. 5.86%. So without getting too long-winded or stealing the show from our March presentation or from the Finance Committee report that you'll hear in a few minutes, you know, we've got some challenges, and we're going to have to work to overcome them. And how that plays out is unknown at the time, but everything will be considered, all of our needs, all of our staffing, all of our supplies, and we will make the best decisions that we can. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to Superintendent's report. There are 2 items. Can I have a motion? Ms. White? Ms. Light? Any discussion?
Ready? Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Ms. Light?
Yes.
Ms. Hira?
Yes.
Ms. McKeon?
Yes.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes.
Mr. Amin?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Shapak?
Yes.
Mr. Rashio? Yes. Motion carries.
That brings us to approval of minutes. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Hira? Mr. Salmon? Any discussion?
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Ms. Light?
Yes.
Ms. Hira?
Yes.
Ms. McKeon?
Yes.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes.
Mr. Amin?
Yes.
Ms. Shapak?
Yes.
Mr. Rashio? Yes. Motion carries.
That brings us to the Finance Committee report.
This is the Finance Committee report from January 19th. So some of these items have since been moved to the Facilities and Operations Committees, and then we'll be dealing with different issues going forward. In addition, because this is the most current one, sorry. So the first issue is the Aramark update that we received. So based on facilities, the Aramark staffing is currently short by 5.5 custodians and 1 groundskeeper. These numbers are in flux right now based on various different reasons, but 2 custodians were scheduled to start on January 19th. 1 custodian is awaiting state approval, another is awaiting fingerprinting on the 25th, and 1 is awaiting assignment of fingerprinting appointment, which is taking longer than normal. After these approvals, the district will be short half of a head of custodian headcount. The groundskeeper position has been hired, and that individual is starting the week of January 23rd. That date may be in flux as well at this point. From a food service perspective, there are currently 26 employees made up of 1 manager, 1 assistant manager, and 24 food service line workers. We are currently down 7 employees made up of 1 administrator, 3 food service line workers at Ridge High School, and an additional 3 food service line workers across the district. The starting wage being offered to replace these positions was $14 an hour, and no traction was being made in hiring for the school year. So Aramark is raising the starting wage to $16 an hour. The impact to the cost this school year would be approximately $13,000. This results in no additional cost to the district, as Aramark would not change the guarantee amount of $250,000. The guarantee is what is remaining in the income surplus for the district. This amount can be used to pay for lunch service aids and for kitchen equipment upgrades that we're looking at doing this year, or looking at budgeting for and planning out this year and into the future years. In addition, a new food service director was hired to replace the current director, who's no longer with us due to lack of performance. There has been no price increase in the district food service for 4 years. The price of materials of labor has increased. I have here 20%. We were just notified it was 22%. Therefore, there's a need to renegotiate a price increase for next year. Bill, our advocate rep, shared that districts typically raise the meal price by 5 to 10 cents per year, and it was suggested that perhaps a 25 cents increase for meal prices in 2023-2024. The previous contract guarantee was $490,000. Due to inflation, the guarantee has shrunk to $250,000, and in order to maintain the current guarantee, the district needs to invest back into the program for food service equipment. Related to Aramark's contract, the food service contract is a one-year contract with up to 4 renewals that was signed in the 2020-2021 school year. Annual renewals are options, and both parties must agree to renew. If either party does not agree, the district will need to go out to bid. Next page. Facilities contract is a 2-year contract with 3 one-year renewals. The RFP is expected in another 3 years. And now the next issue that we spoke about was with Spiesel Architects related to kitchen equipment. So a proposal was received from Spiesel Architects to replace the serving line and kitchen equipment. The total estimated cost of improvements is $1,216,268, which includes all equipment, including the installation. Any upgrades to the facilities to bring buildings and installations up to the current code have not been contemplated into this cost estimate. The proposed installation timeline, which was further discussed at the facilities NOPS meeting, is to be completed by September 2024 for WAMS and Ridge, and the elementary schools upgrades to be completed by September of 2025. The committee had some questions and the comments related to that. One was, is it possible to perform all the upgrades over the 2023-2024 summer break? The answer was it will take 3 months to get paperwork together, and we would need a hard stop during mid-August to prepare for the school year. The second question was, is the timing of the bids in the spring going to hamper the ability to get good bids? We were told that the best time for bids to go out is in the fall, and the district will recognize an increased cost of work if it's required to be done by mid-August. Each bid is set up by school requirements, and there's a cost associated with putting out the bids. General comment was that there was a general consensus that the district wants to move forward with this as quickly as possible. Our next steps related to this issue is determination if all the upgrades are necessary or a nice to have, which we did get an update in the Facilities and Operations Committee. So you'll be hearing about that in next months, or the next update for facilities knobs. Then there would be the definition of the phases and the timeline of the project based on the greatest needs to the districts, and then the approval of Spiesel Architects to perform the work. The number 3 piece in part of our agenda was the project planning updates. So the parapet wall at RHS, the surveyors were arriving on January 20th, or what did arrive on January 20th, to design a fix for the leak in the area is covered with a tarp in the interim. The handicap pathway to the bleachers at Ridge, two schematics should be prepared the week of January 3rd, and we'll revisit the next meeting. Sorry, this is a long one. We had a lot of stuff that was going on. HVAC update. This is the HVAC replacement project with the bid. The summary is that the project is to replace the in-classroom units in 8 classrooms and consists of 9 units at RHS. Budgeting for this project was allocated from the ARP ESSER 3 grants. The status is that this is close to being put out to bid. The bid advertisement will be sent to Beth Brooks, and she will arrange for publication in the newspaper. I believe that actually, as an update, that did go out as of the last.
That went to the newspaper, it should be advertised very shortly.
Okay, so you should be seeing an advertisement in the Burnsville News for that going forward. The rooftop unit district-wide inventory, an assessment of the existing HVAC equipment was received from CM Engineers LLC. The total estimated replacement cost for all the equipment that was determined to need replacement totaled $6,068,075. This cost includes the price of equipment and installation on the existing structure, does not include any structural modifications, architectural modifications, new mechanical work below the roof and controls outside of the replacement units. It also does not include taxes, premium labor, or management oversight. The costs are broken down as follows. Liberty Corner is $83,500. Oak Street is $861,000. Cedar Hill is $70,000. Mount Prospect School is $1,719,825. Whams is $1,115,625, and Ridge High School is $2,008,125. The general discussion about this is grants. We may be able to apply for ROD grants, and they're coming out, and the district needs to evaluate what they will and will not cover related to the cost of this RTU project. If they cover HVAC, the district will want to submit the entire amount to determine funding for the project. The full design package is not needed to submit the grant application. ROD grants may cover 40% of that cost if they are covered. Currently, there is $170,000 available from the ESSER 2 grant, and the committee needs an updated report to determine what amount is available from the ESSER 3 grant and if these funds can be allocated to this project under the grant guidelines. The pricing, there may be the need to add additional curbing to the roof for the new units should the platform not be sufficient for the replacement units. This additional cost has not been considered. The assumption is the zoning is still the same and everything will be placed on the roof. No structure evaluations have been made related to the quote, and no code upgrades have been considered. Any structural changes will be subject to the issue of steel, as the cost of steel has increased due to the inflation by 20%. General rooftop units are mostly in the common areas of the school, and the classroom units have been in the process of being replaced. The next steps is to prepare evaluation of the units that are most urgently in need of replacement, which we heard a little bit about at the Facilities and Ops meeting, evaluate the maintenance records and cost of maintenance. The ROD grant application, we're obtaining a proposal from Tony to do enough work to enable us to submit the grants for the rooftop units should they be covered. Timing of the bid package, generally this takes about a 4 to 6 month process. It's always better to submit it in the fall, as for the best prices come during the October-November time period. District facilities projects was the next topic that we discussed. This is a really long meeting, guys, sorry. Construction update on the OSS work project. The dental detail has been completed and the district is down to a punch list. The dental detail was fabricated with treated lumber and painted. The punch list is being developed and then the contract will be closed out. The punch list could take several months to close out. From a budget perspective, a ROD grant originally filed 10 years ago paid for 40% of this project. The contractor has requested a changed order for part of the project, and this will need to be resolved before the project is completely closed out. The Ridge Varsity Complex engineering proposal. Proposal has been received from 2 parties, Boswell Engineering and French and Perillo. The total cost of Boswell proposal was approximately $16,000 higher. However, the district has experience with Boswell, as they are the firm that performed the turfing of Lee Field and track, and the district has a positive experience working with them. Therefore, the recommendation is to move forward with Boswell. The proposal includes the following tasks: conceptual design, topography survey, soil borings and geotechnical reports, design and preparation of contract documents, bid administration, and construction administration. The engineer will determine if project feasibility, prepare all contract drawings and project specifications, prepare electrical drawings and necessary plans, details stormwater calculations and apply for certification from engineering and environmental organizations. This project is addressing the drainage issues at all of the fields, and the engineer will revise the contract to address the drainage of each field by name. If at any time the feasibility of the project is in question, and this was updated to if at any point the board wishes to not move forward, the district can cancel the contract and pay for the work performed up to the point. Next steps is to approve the contract and commence with the feasibility study. RHS, Ridge High School locker room flooring, the district is waiting on delivery of the materials. The parent representatives from the Booster Club came to pick the color of the baseboards around the perimeter. And then the RHS main gym light fixtures, the district has less than 8 fixtures remaining to complete, which I actually think have been completed since this report. So that's that. Thank you to the Ridge Booster Club. I know. The Booster Club for Ridge Wrestling wants the BOE to split the cost on the new mats for the wrestling room. The vertical and floor mats need to be replaced as they are aging and getting hard, and additionally there are holes in the mats and the walls. The cost is $16,000 for the wall mats, which will be contributed by the Booster Club, so thank you. And they are requesting that BOE be responsible for the cost of the floor mats, which is estimated to be $14,000. In addition, the Booster Club just donated the new competition mat. So the next step is approval for the expenditure of that $14,000 for the replacement of the floor mats. Budget calendar and budget drivers, I think we spoke a little bit about that. Nick spoke a little bit about that, so I won't go into further detail related to that. And the other 2 items we didn't get to for lack of time. Just one more thing, I wanted to provide some additional information related to Nick's SOS message that was sent out today. The current board's approach is to review capital projects needs, the district's debt, and opportunity for early retirement, the inflationary increase in expenses, and working with the administration to evaluate the staffing mix, including increasing the number of counselors and potentially implementing the police department safety recommendations from the audit that was performed years ago. All of this needs to be balanced and scheduled out in phases so that we can pay for this on a go-forward basis without issuing additional debt. Prior set of decisions that was made that makes up over $5 million of our annual tax levy on our residents through 2030. As such, no budget or decisions will be finalized until May. Last year's unaudited financial statement shows that expenses were $5.8 million less than originally budgeted, and the revenues increased $3.6 million over what was budgeted for the 2021-2022 year. This creates a $9 million plus swing in our favor to carry into the school year, and last year's tax levy could not consider this swing as it was unknown at the time of budgeting, and the year ended with an unaudited budgeted and appropriate fund balance of $20 million carried forward to this year. We have a meeting with the auditors at the next Finance Committee meeting to discuss that issue, as well as the results of the audit, and determine how those funds, if any, can be used to offset the tax levies to reduce the tax burden for the community as a whole without cutting any programs, initiatives, or staffing. So I urge anybody that has any questions related to the district finances to contact Nick or myself directly. We'd be happy to discuss at length and relay any concerns that you guys might have. So thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions? No, that's for the board. That's for the- Okay, there's one item, approved list of disbursements. Can I have a motion? Mr. Salmon? Ms. McCune? Any discussion? Okay, can we vote?
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Ms. Light?
Yes.
Ms. Hira?
Yes.
Ms. McKeon?
Yes.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes.
Mr. Amin?
Yes.
Ms. Chipak?
Yes.
Mr. Ratio?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and that'll bring us to the Personnel Committee report from January 20th.
Personnel met on January 20th. There was some discussion about staffing in the CBAP, elementary CBAP programs, but Dr. Reed was unavailable at this meeting, so she will be there next meeting to go over the aides and staffing requests that she has for the upcoming school year. We did get a projection of enrollments for K through 5, elementary. The kindergarten projection was based on Dr. Grip's demographer report. February is the time for kindergarten registration, so we will be updated as the year progresses. And that is the only other item that I can report publicly, because everything else was contractual or contract or contractual per staff or security related. Thank you.
Any questions? No? Okay, that brings us up to the policy committee report.
Policy last met on Monday, January 9th, so I'm reporting out from then. First reading, we did a first reading on policy 9150, school visitors, and policy 9160, public attendance at school events. And essentially, policy 915 was modified to reflect that if there's a school event, whoever is holding the school event, they have the right to check individuals' bags who are attending the events for safety and security reasons, and to determine that bags are perhaps not permitted. Policy 916, it was the same language that was modified. We also, as a district, received a policy alert 229 from Strauss Esme. For those of you who don't know who Strauss Esme is, it's a consulting firm that guides our district to make sure that our policies and regulations are consistent with state and federal laws pertaining to schools. And in this summary, there were certain policies that we had that had to be abolished, revised, and modified. You want me to go through all of them?
I think maybe in the interest of time, we don't have to do that tonight.
Okay. So, I mean, the policies and the changes that were made, I mean, they're pretty self-explanatory. But again, these were recommended by the consulting firm that we used, and we essentially adopt whatever their recommendations are, just to make sure that we're in compliance with state and federal law. That's it.
Any questions? Okay, curriculum from January 6th.
First, we had a review of some proposed textbooks. The first one was the AP European History textbook. Currently, a textbook from 2010 is being used for instruction. The AP exam was updated in 2014. The textbook, A History of Western Society Since 1300 for the AP course, the 13th edition, copyright 2020, selected aligns and reflects the changes to the exam in terms of scope and sequence of the course. It comes with great supplemental materials. In addition to a team of teachers and a supervisor who reviewed the textbook, students did as well and gave district positive feedback. More perspectives are provided in this textbook. We also reviewed a new sociology textbook. Many factors were considered when selecting a textbook for this course. The first criteria was to find a textbook geared specifically to high school students, not college students. There are not many options available. Next, the textbook needs to be accessible to readers with a diverse range of abilities. This course runs at the CP and honors level concurrently. In addition, as an elective, it's open to all learners. In addition to a team of teachers and a supervisor, students were also given the opportunity to review the textbook and provide feedback. They specifically liked how the textbook was laid out. In addition to digital access, the class will also be provided with a set of books. Additional teacher resources are provided. We were given a link that provides a tutorial on how we could as well access the textbook. Some concerns were raised about this textbook, and the administration will bring additional information to the February meeting for further discussion. Next, we reviewed math placement criteria for the coming year, and there have been very few changes made to math placement for the 23-24 school year. The only two changes are in Accelerated Math 5 and Accelerated Middle School Math in Grade 6. The changes are based on the feedback from teachers provided during summer work. As always, teachers will talk to both parents and students if a student qualifies for an accelerated course, but a teacher thinks it may not be the best path. Ultimately, the decision will be left to the student. Students must take all common district assessments, which include the Spring MAP, the CTP-5, and NJSLA, in order to be considered for an accelerated course. The assessments are typically given in the spring, and the dates will be provided on the district's testing calendar. For Accelerated Math 5, the administration of the CTP-5 mathematics test independent school norm will replace the report card indicator. For on-ramping into accelerated middle school math in 6th grade, scores on both the NJ, SLA, and CTP5 have been added to the rubric to meet the qualifying criteria. We then also reviewed the class size report, which was shared out at the January 23rd Board of Ed meeting. Then we also had a brief update on the health opt-outs. And that is it.
Any questions?
I have a question. Regarding the math placement, why were these additional changes made? I'm just curious.
So specific, no, there were two. So you want to know why?
Yeah, the additional requirements were made.
They're not additional requirements, they're just different requirements. So I have to think for a second.
Changes.
Yeah, yeah.
It was, instead of the report card, there were standardized testing that replaced that criteria.
Correct. The committee just felt that the standardized testing would be more objective and reliable than the report card indicators. So they did a sort of an analysis of those indicators and made the recommendation to switch to CTP5, which is something we've been using for a couple of years. So we've been analyzing those results, and we felt that that was a better match for students trying to on-ramp into the course.
How about for 6th grade?
For 6th grade, I think it was the same change.
That you added this additional requirement.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, right. And the other, with the return of NJSLA, right, that's another assessment we used to use previously. It kind of went away for the 2 years during COVID, and so now we're bringing that back as another more reliable, standardized tool than a subjective one.
Anybody else? Okay, wellness, I believe it's still you.
Okay, so we were given a brief review on what was going to take place for the February 1st Wellness Day. So for K through 5, a variety of training took place on the professional day. Elementary teachers participated in professional development activities specific to their roles. K through 5 classroom teachers, math and reading specialists, and special education teachers had part 2 of the IXL training. IXL is a personalized learning platform, and it combines curriculum and a continuous diagnostic, individual guidance, and real-time analytics to help teachers differentiate instruction for each of their students. ESL teachers had access for ELS, accessing comprehension and communication in English state-to-state for English language learners training. Quest and media specialists had Video, which is a video creation software, and CTP5 training, including how to use the test results. CBAP teachers were involved in training all day. Counselors continue to train and work on their national certification. In addition, classroom teachers and PE teachers had advanced SOGI training, that stands for Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity, and Gender Expression, which is the second part of High Tops training. The workshop titled Having Affirming Conversations gave examples of how to not only hold affirming conversations, but how to make lessons more inclusive. Time was provided for Q&A, and to be clear, High Tops is not instructing teachers on what they must be implementing in the classroom. Secondary teachers had this training in November, and elementary teachers had been requesting guidance and support on handling sensitive topics, and the training focused on arming teachers with necessary tools that they had been asking to be provided. Teachers are not being told to address issues, but they have asked for guidance in how to respond in affirming ways so a student in crisis or a student being bullied or witnessing bullying knows who to turn to for help and feels that they can go to an adult. High Tops presented already to the administrative cabinet. An idea posed was to have High Tops present to parents as well on topics like stereotyping and influences on children like social media. At WAMS, the day combined wellness and professional development activities. The staff were surveyed to see what interested them and how they wanted the day to be structured. The top 3 requests from teachers were topics related to managing conflict in the classroom, building connections, and utilizing technology. The afternoon ran as an ed camp, and teachers signed up for 3 activities of interest to them. Staff building days had fell by the wayside during COVID, and Mrs. Hudak reported being very pleased to be able to bring them back. Specifically, she was excited to bring back the Super Bowl, where staff make a variety of soups which are sampled by everyone and judged, and it's a great way to have brought everyone together and kick off the wellness portion of the day. At Ridge, the morning was, the first half was wellness for students, and then it extended to the afternoon for staff. As on past wellness days, there were 4 rotations for all students, including an art-based rotation where students were able to see a performance of the band and the orchestra. Freshmen, sophomore, and juniors had a rotation with counselors to review the program of studies, any changes or new courses, and were provided with any information needed in order to make course selections. There was also a tea time rotation that included several activities. Kindness and compassion are the focus of this initiative for February and March. All students also had an opportunity to gather and socialize with peers, and there was a variety of food sold as well. The seniors had requested to be able to be in charge of the planning and running of the wellness component of the day for their class and had worked in conjunction with Ms. Dewsbout and Ms. Howarth. Their goal was to build unity as a class. Staff will also be participating during the morning program, and then they took part in professional development in the afternoon, which included diving into the culture and climate data. At the last professional day, the staff were surveyed, and the results from that survey were reviewed. Staff have had a goal as a building of addressing wellness by building a supportive environment to work. The teacher space that was open this fall has been a great place for them to gather and have breakfast and lunch and even some fun competitions. And then we had an update on the Lifeline Suicide Prevention Programming. The program was approved a few months ago to be incorporated into existing practices. The full administrative cabinet has had training on this program, including an overview of future training so that everyone understands the purpose of the program. The next pull-out day in the spring will focus on postvention, which is what to do after something has occurred. Counselors, staff, and CST will participate. The way a difficult situation is handled is also considered preventative. A goal is to create a community of care. Everyone is on board and grateful to have this type of training. The current status of the status, the number of students coming forward, the different types of situations students are dealing with, various reports kept have been and will continue to be reviewed. Initial data was provided to us. To date, there have been 3,800 visits to counselors at Ridge High School. Last year in totality, there were 5,700 visits reported. Last year, there were 52 suicide prevention reports across the district, and as of today, which was the date of this meeting, there had been 57 reports written, mostly at the secondary level. Violence prevention reports are also written and kept by staff. Last year, there were 6 reports district-wide. This year, there have already been 13 reports written. We asked for a breakdown of data by semester to be provided later in the year. A discussion was held as to why the Wellness Committee was established. It was in response to national and local trends, rates of mental health issues rising, such as suicide, drug use, anxiety, depression, and school refusal, to name a few. This summer, intervention training will be provided as that follows postvention. Children need to learn coping skills in addition to knowing who they can turn to and go to for help. A very real problem exists due to the easy access of social media. Often children are hearing so quickly via social media of a situation that it becomes essential to be able to move quickly to get in front of the information. And lastly, we just had a brief discussion about the best time for the committee to meet, and we agreed to move the time beginning in February to 9.
Thank you. Any questions? Any liaison committee reports? Okay, that brings us up to public comment. Want to make a public comment, please come up, sign in, put your name and state your name and address. Limit your public comment to 3 minutes, please. There'll be a second opportunity for people to speak during the BT Connect meeting as well. Oh, and just as a reminder, we're going to cut off public comment at 8 p.m. so we can move on to the BT Connect.
Is it on? Hi, Victoria Costa, 15 Hilltop Road. This past weekend, I spent my entire weekend fundraising for the Ridge fencing team. Additionally, I spent the last few weeks leading up to this, spending many hours as well on the same endeavor. Please note, I no longer have a kid in the school system, nor do I have a kid on the fencing team. I believe most teams do and should fundraise for their teams. It is important to assist in the financial cost, plus it builds camaraderie and teamwork along with the kids. This year's fundraiser was pivotal and needed to be successful. Why, you may ask? It is because the fencing team received zero funding from the athletic department. At the beginning of the season, we were told that there was no money, zero for the fencing team, out of the athletic sports budget. The reason we were given was that another sports team went over their budget, therefore there was no budget for us. I would like to have a show of hands from the administration, the BOE, and the parents out there as to who thinks it's okay to have one sport team spend frivolously and another team absorb that impact. What kind of financial prudence is going on here? Looks like we cannot manage the athletic budget, so I would respectfully ask the BOE to do a financial due diligence on this matter. Additionally, as we gear up to talk about DE&I would like to know how you think the almost 50 team members feel about equity and inclusion, how they are valued, especially after winning multiple state competitions and a fencing coach debacle mismanaged by the prior board. While we pontificate about DE&I and social emotional learning and wellness, I mostly see lip service and no action, which leads me to my next and last question. How do you really measure DE&I and social emotional learning?
Sherry Nelson, 195 Smoke Rise Road. This thing's aimed way down. Okay, so mine is about health curriculum. I have several questions or comments. At the last Board of Ed meeting, during board forum, when it was a discussion on K through 8 health curriculum, Ms. Fox stated that all students would be finished with the sex ed curriculum by March 1st, and this was kind of in advising the board not to take any action to make changes this year based on that timeline. But that information was inaccurate because half of the students in grades 6 through 8 still have not had their sex ed curriculum. The way it's divided through the marking periods, if you've had kids at WAMS or at Ridge, you would understand. Only about half get there by this time of year. Also, on January 26th, the parents for the junior class got their first communication of the year regarding the health curriculum as they were starting this marking period. And we received 3 separate emails from Ms. Fox regarding the health curriculum in the span of about 45 minutes with corrections and revisions to the original letter. It's just another example of confusion that's being created about the opt-out process. I sent an email to all of you regarding this. Ms. Fox did call me and apologize and acknowledge that the rollout this year had some problems that need to be corrected, but I don't understand why we're waiting till next year to fix those problems. We have half a school year left, and we have half the kids who haven't had this curriculum. Another concern I wasn't aware of until my kid was in health is how the opt-out process is actually working, and this Google form that you're sent to fill out. It does not match the New Jersey state law and the statute for this. I'll just give a quick quote. Any child whose parent or guardian presents to the school principal a signed statement that any part of the instruction in health, family life education, or sex education is in conflict with their conscience or sincerely held moral or religious beliefs shall be excused. Our opt-out form asks parents to explain the moral or ethical or conscientious objection. Why was religion completely omitted? I would venture to say religion is probably a lot of the reason that you would get some opt-out, and it's been replaced with the word ethical for no reason. And I asked about this on a January 26th email. I checked the form today. It still does not match the law. It should be updated. And additionally, some teachers have accidentally sent the emails for opting out with the curriculum to the students by accident. They clicked the wrong column to copy, it happened to my kids' class, the wrong column of email addresses in Genesis. So that means the kids are given the curriculum. Then the parent loses their right. It violates their right to opt out of it if a teacher sends their curriculum directly to a child's email address. Again, another example, this process isn't working. Something needs to change, and we shouldn't wait till next year to change it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jane Zhang. I live at 3 Wellington Drive in Basking Ridge. I'm the president of Burnet's Chinese American Association. Tonight I'm here to thank Burnet's BOE for its full support to BCAA, which stands for Burnet's Chinese American Association. Lunar New Year celebration event took place on January 29th, right here, actually right at the cafeteria and the gym across the hallway, the high school. The event was attended by over 500 people with very different cultural background. BOE support demonstrated its commitment to promote cultural diversity. BCAA truly appreciated BOE's effort because BCAA value diversity, education, and academic excellence. To show our appreciation, BCAA would like to donate $500 to BOE to support BOE's effort to make Burnet's School the best in New Jersey and one of the best in the nation. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Alankar Gupta. I'm a resident of 45 Dickinson Road, Basking Ridge. So this comment actually have changed from, actually this question has changed to a comment thanks to your SOS message. But just wanted to come here and take this opportunity to speak to support the position of MPS Assistant Principal. It's very clear, Mr. Nazarian and the board, that you're not, there's no action to eliminate any administrative position, and the board has not overspent its current year. But just after that information, just wanted to say that, Mr. Pepitone, his passion for learning and genuine care for our kids, especially during the COVID years, was phenomenal. And we really, really appreciate, your team and your staff at MPS. So this has, become more of a comment, than a question in there. But here to support the MPS assistant principal position and the full staff. So thank you for that.
I guess I start talking. Okay. Yeah. My name is Nadia Abdo. I live at 84 Galloping Hill Road in Basking Ridge. I attended Ridge High School and graduated in 1999, and this is my first Board of Ed meeting. I do not have any children, even though I love kids, and I work with them all the time. But I have nieces that I really love. And yeah, I've been working with children and families forever, including babysitting days when I was at Ridge. I've gone on to get my PhD in developmental psychology, and actually when I was working on my dissertation, I was able to get IRB approval, and I worked with juniors and seniors at the time and administered surveys and questionnaires. After parent approval, they had to get parent approval if they were under 18, and I would say probably 95% of the students were under 18 at the time. And my study looked at coping, mindfulness, and just kind of the correlation between all of that and performance in the classroom. I still have memories of Nick Markarian, I think. He was at the middle school at the time. I was also a substitute teacher here. So I'm going to wrap this up real quick and just say that this is my first time attending. Just from being back in the community recently, I've chatted with a few individuals, and they filled me in a bit about what's been going on. And I just want to let all of you know that I'm looking forward to attending future meetings and offering insight. I'm looking forward to getting to know the board members and to emailing them thoughts and ideas. I already have a whole list of some things that might be useful for problem solving, some of the points they came up with today, including transportation and a lot of the wellness programming and funding. So I'm looking forward to sharing some thoughts with them in an email soon and to hopefully getting the message out to other families and parents who are here. Thank you for giving me the time to share.
Good evening, Shanna Pfau, 40 Berkeley Circle. I also had a different speech somewhat prepared, but in light of, the email coming out this afternoon. But I just wanted to just address also, again, the assistant principal emails and stuff going on. My children are at Oak Street, so in the fall, we were near and dear to this topic because our school was one of the only elementary schools that was potentially on the line for having to share an assistant principal due to a reduction in assistant principals at the middle school. And at the time, we had some great conversations and appreciate the board. I know you got a lot of emails at the time then, and Mr. Markarian spent some time with me and my co-president at the PTO there to kind of explain to us. We had some questions. And at that time, we made some great points. I think I made some great points. Maybe you agree, because in the end, they decided not to take away our assistant principal because of, maybe, he stated some facts about, hey, it's two people in the grand scheme of things and $100 million budget, roughly, rough numbers, 2 positions, $1.50 each. It's 0.3% of the budget. Can we look to keep these positions? Because they do fill a valuable role for our students' education and safety at the elementary school level. And I know that the WAMS community and Ridge community are now dealing with having to share those positions, and by no means do I think any position be eliminated from as far as a parent who's concerned here. But at the time, you agreed at the time not to reduce Oak Street, so I want to know, hey, while you're going through the budget discussions, I know nothing's been decided yet, but maybe reconsider those points that we discussed in the fall, because you did hear us and you decided not to take away our assistant principal and not share the responsibilities of one person over 800 plus families that they have to get to know, not only the students, but the teachers, the parents. Again, so I just wanted to put it out there. I appreciate you guys being willing to let us talk about this evening. I appreciate there seems like a lot more people here tonight. I don't know, how many people are here to talk about assistant principals? Oh, clap. Okay. So I think that, it's glad to know that you guys are going to consider that as you develop your budget and know that that's dear and near, at least to my heart, and it sounds like to the bulk of the community here tonight as well.
Erin Coonahan, 8 Hancock Court. I also wanted to address the assistant principal piece, and I really appreciate the board starting the discussion early. That was the goal of the Facebook group and the communications that went out. And I do want to clarify that anything that has been said was heard either in public meetings or in superintendent meetings that I was a part of. And I think the most important thing that we had wanted to achieve from sending out communications was to open up the talks early, because obviously there are a lot of people in our community that feel strongly about our assistant principals, regardless of the school that their children attend. And I think the most important thing is that we get the right information out. There was no misinformation spread. The information that was spread was heard, and maybe it wasn't fully contexted as it needed to be. But I think the most important thing that we can do is come together as a community to make sure that the kids are supported in the best way possible. I really am looking forward to hearing from the Finance Committee on the budget, because it sounds like there has been a lot of additional information not shared with PTO presidents, not shared with maybe staff and administration, and that's purposeful, and we get that. But the best thing that we can do moving forward is to keep showing up and to keep talking about it, and to make sure that our assistant principals know that we love them, we support them, that we're not going away. And I will be the first to apologize if any of my words were incorrectly stated. I'm okay with that. I'm allowed to make mistakes. The board's allowed to make mistakes. We're all human. We're all here. But the most important thing that we can do is support our assistant principals and the board as they make the difficult decision. And since it is a draft budget, I would love to know if all of the assistant principals are in the draft budget as of today. So I hope we hear that sooner rather than later, because there's not a lot of meetings before this budget gets approved, and there's not a lot of time for us to have public comment on it. And that's the most important thing, that our voices are all heard. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have time for one more speaker.
Hi, Barbara Gary, Dryden Road. I am here, I wasn't here to talk about assistant principals, but since you're going to bring it up, I'm going to voice the opinion that WAMS needs an assistant principal back. That 400 students in 7th grade who lost their 4th grade year, who lost their 5th grade year, who had half of a mass 6th grade year, is in dire need of an assistant principal full-time. That's just for them. They're going to be 8th graders next year. The HIBs are still rising. The inappropriate behavior at the middle school is still rising, but they have an assistant principal who is soon going to be, she's currently also the assistant principal for the senior class. So now she's going to have to spend her time at WAMS and also try to service the 400 students that are going to be graduating. So her time is going to be very thin at WAMS. So she needs to be, so we need an assistant principal at WAMS. And I'm sorry for the middle school, at the elementary schools, but something needs to give. And the WAMS 7th grade class has been in dire need for years. My daughter sat in a 3rd grade class with 30 students. They constantly get the short stick. That's their group. It should end. They need an assistant principal now. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now at 8 o'clock, so we're at our BT Connect portion of the meeting. There will be an opportunity to speak out from the tables during BT Connect, so if people have something to say, they still have the opportunity to say it.
While you're connecting. Right here, Sean, on the side. Hi. Okay, thanks everybody again for being here tonight. Let me just explain a couple things real quick. A quick public service announcement. For those folks that might be online waiting to make public comment, we'll try to make some time to do that. We'll check at the end of our meeting to see if there's anybody looking to make public comment in Zoom at the end of the meeting. Okay, Ms. Fox? Just to explain a little bit about our BT Connect format, if you have not been here for a BT Connect meeting, what we're trying to do is take some notes and get some input from the community. So normally what we do is we have kind of an introduction to what we're talking about tonight. And tonight's introduction will be done by Mr. Seid. He's our assistant superintendent. And when he gets into slide number 2, you'll see why he is so deeply involved in making tonight's presentation. So we normally start with a little introduction type presentation that we'll see here in a minute. And then we end that presentation by asking folks to kind of think about some questions that we would like your feedback on. And we typically just ask you to make some notes, so we leave some poster paper around the rooms. I'm seeing that we have some more folks around the back. So maybe, Ms. Fox, if you would take a minute, maybe while Sean's presenting, could you help get a little bit more of the poster paper towards the back, because we have some other tables that may not have any. And we ask folks to make notes right on that poster paper. What we do is we collect all the poster paper back, and we turn your notes into meeting minutes. So we might find a lot of commonalities on some of the papers, so we summarize by including all the unique comments when we make our meeting minutes for the BT Connect meeting. Okay, so we have an introduction. We'll leave you with some questions to work on. Copies of those questions are actually out on the table, so that in case you forget what we're asking you to give us some feedback on, you'll see it on those papers that we left on the tables. and it'll also be left up here on our slide deck. Okay? So thanks again for coming tonight. And with that, we'll get started with Mr. Sion.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. Good evening, everyone. We have a great turnout tonight. This is so great to see so many people from the community. We've got, I see administrators here. I see lots of staff as well. So thank you for being here tonight. I am going to talk a little bit about the audit itself, which now has been out in the public for about 3 months. So hopefully you read pieces of it, perused it. The first 40 pages or so are the summary, and then the folks that really took time might have looked through all 900 plus pages. And so I know we have varying degrees of familiarity with the audit. So what we'll try to do tonight is give you an overview of some of their findings, but then also talk to you about some possible follow-up steps. And really, the goal tonight is to get feedback from you. That's the most important part of tonight. And so, you know, to make the reference to where everybody was last night, which was probably watching the Super Bowl, I'm the pregame show, and then we'll actually start with the Super Bowl itself. That's you and your feedback. So that's really the most important part of tonight. And there'll be a couple other sports references because we often talk about sports in the sense of equality in Title IX, and that's one of the roles I play, and that is very important. And so I'll talk about that, and to Mr. Markarian's point, why have I been involved so heavily in the work? It's because of some of the roles that I play in the district as the assistant superintendent, not just as the human resource manager, but also the affirmative action officer, and the Title IX coordinator, anti-bullying coordinator, and of course, as a public school system, we're an equal opportunity employer. And so these are all things that I'm regularly trained on and meet with the administration to discuss. And of course, these issues will come up from time to time, and we'll talk about some of these things as we look at some of the themes from the audit itself. So the format will be a brief overview, and then we'll turn over the program tonight to you. And as Mr. Markarian says, then the share out. And it's so great to see. We're going to get a lot of feedback tonight. Okay, so this is what I just talked about. The audit itself was kind of broken out into some themes, then what they would refer to, they don't use this language, but strengths and areas of growth. So those are things that I'll talk about tonight. I pulled out some overarching themes that from the report. I did not mention every single strength and recommendation. You can certainly look at those. The document is available on our website, of course, and I know it was blasted out when we sent out the advertisement. So we'll talk about some of the themes. We'll also talk about some of the initial ideas that we've already had. I know this is important work that we're engaging in with you all, but we're also going to be doing this with our staff on March 1st. That's that in-service day. I know Ms. Fox and I had just talked about that before the meeting, some of that important work. And really, as I said, it's collecting feedback. But I just want to preface tonight by saying this is important work, and that's the reason we undertook the work. The work that we're doing isn't just about getting feedback from the community or from the students or from parents. It's about creating a safe space for folks where they feel comfortable, because if you don't have a safe space, we don't have that optimal learning environment. And that goes for our teachers to feel safe, it goes for our staff, our parents coming into buildings. But the goal here is ultimately to create that safe space so that we have an optimal learning environment for students of all ability levels, at every single ability level. And so it's important work, it's work we wanted to undertake, and the great thing about it is I see this as an ongoing conversation. This, in my mind, isn't just a one-time, one-stop shop where we get feedback and don't talk about it again. We hope to be able to elicit feedback over a length of time, because the hope is that we'll see some changes and things that might be working really well and things that aren't. And so we definitely want that feedback from you all. It's really, really important. Okay, so just some quick metrics on the report itself, right? So these are things that you looked at the report. They talked about how much feedback we actually got. The consultants did do focus groups, and remember, it was the consultants running the show, not us. We wanted the element of objectivity, so it wasn't district administration conducting the audit. It was us squared. The focus groups, 250 participants. They interviewed 157 students. You can see almost 3,600 surveys across K-12. And then these are the focus areas identified in that audit report. And so the area that, and I'll talk about each of these briefly, but the curriculum SEL competencies, they did not do a curriculum audit. What they did is they looked at SEL, so social emotional learning, and how that's been integrated or needs to be integrated into the curriculum or counseling department. So that's the focus. It isn't an audit of the actual curriculum. That actually happens internally. And if you've been coming to board meetings lately, you might have heard about program reviews or program evaluations that are conducted over a 5-year cycle. So those are the 4 themes. This should look familiar if you looked at the report, because you would have seen these identified: voice and decision making, that sense of belonging. And that's really what I would call culture climate, the communication, and the idea of communicating with all constituents, and then disproportionality and access. And so what I'll do is I'll go into each of these and, again, give you what we would look at as strengths and weaknesses, or positives and needs improvement. For our administrators and teachers, you know what you typically see at the end of an observation, right? Okay, so theme 1. So this is voice and decision making, and this was something that, if you looked at the report, the consultants seemed to get the most feedback on this area. There was certainly feedback in other areas, but there was quite a bit of feedback on this. One of the themes that they noted in talking with students, parents, is that we have a lot of vocal stakeholders in the community, very positive, that folks aren't afraid to express viewpoints, which is really important, because how else will you get feedback? But also, one of the frustrations was that the district should find better ways to access those who might not be as vocal, folks that maybe don't feel comfortable speaking in a public forum like this, maybe folks that don't feel comfortable sending an email to the Board of Education. So there are some ideas, and I'll note those at the end, but there are some things that they suggested that we could look at to improve and create an avenue for these folks to be able to speak and express their opinions. The other thing that was noted as a positive is effective staff and administrator relationships. A lot of positive about the building administration, the sense of that open door policy. Our staff did express the ability and the comfort level to be able to go in and speak to their building administration. And the other thing is this audit report the surveys were administered last year. There's very clear board policy on the teaching of controversial issues. So this actually came through the report, that staff felt supported on the teaching of controversial issues, because we have 3 board policies that speak directly to this idea of teaching controversial issues. However, they also noted that there can always be enhanced support or training. In fact, as Ms. Fox, as Ms. White noted in the minutes, that we're always doing follow-up trainings for staff as staff report that they need more guidance and support on a particular issue. And then the other thing that was noted too is that our supervisors, they're K-12, they're spread across the entire district, and the idea that our staff would love to have more access to them, whether it be through some type of a smaller meeting, a smaller setting. Those supervisors are housed at Ridge High School, so K-5 staff expressed a desire to see them more often and have more input when the curriculum is revised. So the second piece, this is that culture climate piece. This is probably, when we talk about what our students are experiencing, this is the one that I call this the through-the-door impression. So these are the things that students, when they walk in the door, might be experiencing almost immediately. These are some of the themes that came up, and also for our staff as well. So one of the things that, when I hire folks, one of the positives, and this is something I talk about a lot, and I think we are incredibly lucky. We have an extremely supportive parent community here. And that is such a positive for us, because we know that when, as administrators, as parents, we call home, there's support, there's a conversation, there's a dialogue, and that was reported as a very positive piece in this community. And, having worked in the community for almost 2 decades, I can attest to that. Very, very positive, very involved parent community, very supportive of their students, and able to have that 2-way dialogue with administration or with teachers. The other positive piece that was noted, and this is work we've been doing for a while now, is the social-emotional learning. You heard it reported out in the wellness report tonight. You almost hear it reported out at every wellness committee meeting, whether it's the guidance department, whether it's counseling changes, whether it's programming. You heard Ms. Hudak in the ed camps, what they're doing at William Adden. That was reflective of the teacher choice. And so the idea that we're looking at wellness, it isn't just focused on students, it's staff as well. And it's the idea that you have a healthy body, healthy mind, to be able to learn, and that readiness piece for our students. But the other thing that was noted as an area of growth was to continue to address stress and mental health. A lot was shared about the impact of the pandemic. Obviously, this had happened on the tail end of the pandemic, and so there were some Anecdotal pieces reported about the impact of screen time on students being isolated because they were home. That's certainly residual impact of the pandemic that we're still seeing behaviorally. And so that's something that we have to continue to address, something that was also mentioned in the wellness minutes as well, some programming that we're looking at. And this is another piece that came up. We saw this very frequently in the report in the culture section, and that is the transition from elementary to middle. There had been a lot of work done middle to high school to help with that transition and always continue to work on that. But many parents and some students, reflecting back, reported addressing the transition from elementary to middle school. We are certainly doing work there. The building administration does actually a great job, but there's always work that could be done that was addressed to try to look at specific skills that students should have mastered by the time they enter into 6th grade, specifically social skills. That came up in the report. And then, of course, this is another big theme that we saw, and again, this came up tonight too, is HIB education and remediation strategies and workshops for staff and students, and I would even say parents as well. The idea that parents should be educated about HIB, what it is, and also the understanding that sometimes, while something might not be a HIB, the consequences are the same. And the big piece is it's about education. That came through in the report, that folks need to continue to understand what HIB is and what type of remediation program we're putting into place. And there is a program that we're looking at, and we'll mention that on the last slide. It's something that we've talked about. We've actually been looking at what other school districts are doing in this area. So I'll save that for the possible areas to explore at the end. And then also inclusivity training. So this is something we started to explore with our staff, and this is something that I'll also mention on the follow-up slide as well. Okay, so communication. Well, this is something that we started a few years ago, that BT Connect, and you'll see it is mentioned later, but we've really tried to make more outreach into the community to do things like this. That was noted in some of the feedback that we got in the equity audit report. The folks seem to appreciate the Friday folders, although some of the feedback was there's too much communication, and it could be overwhelming as well. That folks, especially at the elementary level, elementary parents, get lots of emails, whether it's from the teacher or from the building administration. So some of the recommendations from parents were, can we try to streamline that communication? Maybe one email a day was suggested by many, many parents in the report. I don't know about that, but the other piece was, again, we heard the accessible building administrators and open door policy. We heard it here too. Again, positive feedback, although we also heard that tonight, the positive feedback about the building administration. Easily accessible BOE meetings, I think that's been something positive. If there's something positive that came out of the pandemic as far as board meetings are concerned, now live streaming those meetings, getting feedback electronically and in person, and then our attendance positively has gone up too at board meetings, which is a very positive thing as well. Most students reported that expectations are clear instructionally. There was some confusion expressed by secondary students about disciplinary consequences. They were confused sometimes. Again, this is from students anecdotally, that the discipline isn't always consistent and there's not that education component. So in other words, looking at the activity or the piece of what occurred and how to improve from that. That's going to connect to something we're going to talk about at the end, which is restorative practices, which is something I'll mention later. The communication calendar. So this is related to the email discussion, and that is lots of dates, lots of things happening in the district. Is there a way to streamline it? Now, we do have a district calendar, but folks in the report talked about a unique calendar by building with overlays. This sounds like something we need Alex Blinder for. I don't think he's here tonight. He's our director of IT. But that's something else they talked about, a more cohesive and clear communication calendar for the district. And I know that's something we're always looking at. This is something else that I know that our building administrators, our guidance director, myself, is more parent and caregiver involvement in actual programming. So what do we mean by that? One of the examples was some of the counseling programs we have at Ridge High School, some of our guidance nights, our college readiness nights. Those aren't really well attended. We've seen a drop-off in parent attendance at those, and now it could be because In the Stone Age, when I was doing that job, we didn't have streaming abilities. So now parents can access those things electronically, and so they don't need to attend. But there was some of that back and forth, some of the questions that were asked, that's missed during nights like that. So, one of the things that the audit suggested was to try to bring parents back in for some of this programming. Not easy to do because everyone is very busy, and again, there are a lot of benefits to obviously streaming things and having things available electronically. And then the disciplinary follow-up. So this will connect to the restorative practice piece that I'll talk about, but the idea that students are learning about why the activity occurred and then trying to have a conversation potentially with the individual that might have had the conflict with. There was a lot mentioned about that actually in the report. Now, this is disproportionality and access. How am I doing on time? The strong support program for struggling learners. So this is something that was noted, the fact that we have varying degrees of support for students from our special education programming to our general ed programming. There are lots of levels of support for students. The ease of access to technology, something else positive, obviously recently going with our Chromebooks and one-to-one. And again, we talked about this already a little bit, more communication on the disciplinary communication and response. That came from students in the report. And then the piece that we're looking at now, something that I need to talk to our guidance director more about, is restorative practices. So really what that is, there's a lot of elements to it, but the key is for students to understand the why behind the behavior that took place and to try to learn from it. And really what's at the heart of it is to try to foster empathy. And so the way that you do that, and listen, you can't always do that, depends on the severity of the incident that occurred, but it's to have a conversation between the aggrieved individual and the person, the other individual. And that is a monitored conversation with a counselor or an adult. And so that we've discussed training our counselors potentially on restorative practices. I've talked to Stephanie about that. That's a possibility. The other one, obviously, that's near and dear for me as the Human Resource Director is look for ways to recruit more diverse staff. We are a member of a diversity organization in the state of New Jersey. However, one of the issues, and it was mentioned here, is the labor workforce is dwindling. In education, we're seeing a dramatic decrease in the number of folks entering into education programs. It is dramatic. In the state of New Jersey, it's staggering how few folks are going into education programs. So what's happened is the pool is that much smaller for candidates in general. And so it is difficult to recruit diverse. It's difficult to recruit qualified candidates, let alone diverse candidates. So it's gotten very difficult, but that's something we will continue to work to address. And that's something that my counterparts around the state are always discussing. And then the other piece that came up too, and this was toward the end of the report, is reflect on ways to increase awareness of the advanced level classes for our special education students and allow for greater opportunities potentially for special ed students to succeed in advanced level, whether it be honors or AP classes. That was another big theme for our special education population, really, really important theme that I drew out from the report. And so that's something else that is certainly an access issue and something that we would be discussing. So what I wanted to share to kind of jumpstart things for you are some possible next steps, some things that we would consider as we look at some of the questions that are sitting at your table and before we break out. But I thought that it wouldn't be fair to ask you to brainstorm if we didn't jumpstart things and give you some ideas. So there's a lot there, and I think the important thing to remember is that the report is by no means all-encompassing, right? It's one consultant's perspective interviewing a subsection of the school district. So there are other pieces that need to be included, and that's why nights like this are really important, because you do get other stakeholder input. And I would imagine that folks in the room here may have participated, but we might have folks that didn't participate. So, both opinions are obviously extremely valued. And so, one of the things that we could look to be doing more are more of these nights, but potentially even in smaller settings by school, by grade level, by content area, by topic. There are lots of opportunities. I'm thrilled to see this turnout, which is great. The only downside is I can barely see folks all the way in the back of the room. I see some of my administrative counterparts back there. But one of the formats is to look to potentially change this format to a smaller format where you can have more of a back and forth and a dialogue. That's a possibility. Also, the school-based equity team. So one of my responsibilities, and it's not just mine, but it's the district's, is to do what's called a comprehensive equity plan. Every school system in the state of New Jersey is required to complete that. It's done every 3 years. And what you're doing is a needs assessment on disproportionality and access in all areas in the school system. Curriculum, hiring practices, student discipline, and you do that through a needs assessment through stakeholders in both the schools and community stakeholders. And so the state of New Jersey has not released guidelines for the next 3-year cycle, but what we'd be doing is when we look to do a comprehensive equity plan, we typically have school-based teams. It used to be the professional development committees. We might be looking to do more intensive work because the state has not revised the comprehensive equity plan requirements in a number of years, and I'm being told that that is going to be happening. So I would imagine we're going to be looking at to do that comprehensive equity plan using school-based equity teams and stakeholder involvement from potentially folks in this room. The other piece that I didn't mention in the slides, but it did come up, is looking at our clubs and access and representation. And actually that's come up a couple of times at board meetings over the years. Having specific clubs for specific constituents in the school system. And so that's something that we could always do. Obviously the high school is where almost all of our clubs are, and I know the Ridge team, the Ridge administration does a really good job of looking through that and getting feedback on that and meeting with advisors, but it's always something that we would be looking at and doing an audit from time to time. And then the other thing, and I know this has already happened at the middle school this year, is bringing in effective speakers for our students. Really, really important. Ms. Hudak and I actually have met this year at least a couple of times with a consultant to talk about potentially bringing in a speaker or training for guidance counselors around the issues of equity and equality. Some other possible next steps, and again, these are just possibilities, these are ideas, is to look at, this is for staff because this came up, is looking at our professional development schedule to provide more time for our crosstown meetings. I can remember a time when we used to do that because we did hear from some of our elementary staff they felt disconnected from some of their counterparts across the district, right? So third grade teacher at Oak Street feeling disconnected from third grade teacher at Mount Prospect, and those conversations are really, really important. And so to be able to facilitate more of those for our teachers, that's something that we heard in the report. I mentioned restorative practice already. Small group discussions on emotional intelligence and equity awareness. So this is something that you could see facilitated by guidance counselors potentially. And I will tell you that actually some of this is already happening with our counselors because they are doing this, actually have been doing this for some time. And then the other piece, because staff did speak to wanting more support in certain areas, equity related, is staff workshops and training along with monthly support from both district administration and outside consultants. So this would be on any topic relating to equity, and actually we're starting this work on March 1st. The entire district will be looking at this, a lot of the equity audit and a lot of the themes that came out of this, and we'll be having some conversations about this. So, how'd I do? Yeah, that's about right. I had about 15 minutes. So the piece tonight, so that was the pregame. Now we're going to get to the main event. And that is really to be able to hear from you. And so the goal tonight is don't think inside the box, meaning that just because you looked in the equity report and you saw what you saw, there may be other themes or ideas that were not included. That's really what we want to hear about tonight, as well as some criticism, some things you like, some things you didn't like. What do you think might be our focus from your perspective? I think the important thing too is experiential, right? You're all valuable members of this community, but you all play a different role, right? We've got some staff member hats, parent hats. We've got some that wear both of those hats, actually. I don't know if there are any students here. Any students here? No? Oh, bummer. Okay, so, we've got most of the constituents represented. But, I think what's important is from your experience in the district, and some of you have had a lot of experience, does this, address some of what you've seen as far as equity is concerned, as far as access is concerned, and then what's not been working or what has been working well for you? The other thing, things that surprised you in the report, things that made you scratch your head, and then the follow-up ideas as well. And the other piece is, I missed the first one. And of course, what got left out? What were you surprised we didn't look at or that they didn't look at that you'd like to see looked at? Because by no means, as I said, was that an all-encompassing report. We want to be able to take some of this input because the most important is the input we get from you, and that will guide some of the work we do, because that is important work. And of course, it's going to guide not just the work that we're doing as a community, but what we're doing with our staff, and ultimately to help our students feel safe and comfortable in all the buildings. And not just in the buildings, but clubs, athletics. This really permeates the whole district. So I'm going to need some help from my, Yeah, so we're going to take we only have about a half an hour. So for teachers in the room, you're going to have experience with this. At every table, we need to identify who our recorder is going to be. So it has to be somebody that has decent handwriting. So I would always be the person that says it's not me. And then you also need the other role, which if I'm you, I would take the recorder role, because the other role is the reporter role, that you're the person that's going to report out. I always chose the reporter role. So make sure you choose a recorder and a reporter, but the conversations at the table should be guided by this, but by no means do you have to answer these lock and step. It's really what you feel about maybe one or two of these that grabs you, and we're going to try to collect all of this and share it out with the community. So you have about 31 minutes, and we'll see you back at 9. Thank you. I don't want to interrupt the work, but we have about 5 minutes. So if you could start to wrap up, about 5 minutes. 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Okay. How'd everybody do? Must be doing good if there's all this talking, and that's great. Yeah. So I wish I had gotten around to more tables. I was trying to at the end there just to kind of hear what was being said, and I was peeking over some shoulders to see what was written out. So what we're going to do is we do have a lot of tables, and the thing to keep in mind is we are going to collect every single one of these. We're going to record them, and then we're going to send out all of the notes from tonight so you can see all the feedback. But we're going to try to do an efficient share out, and so we'll pass the mic. I would ask that if the comment has already been made, if you could just skip over that comment if you have a similar comment, just for the sake of efficiency, because we do have a stop of around 9:30, so we're going to try to be efficient. So if you could select your reporter if you haven't done that already, and we'll start. Who wants to start? Want to start? I mean, I'm going to. Oh, wow, right. First hand up. That was. All right. So we'll start here, and then we'll try to pass the mic. And again, maybe a couple of minutes per table, just in the interest of efficiency. Thank you very much. Thanks for being first.
Okay, so let me try to make this fast so everyone has time. Okay, the first thing is like more communication in regards to what is HIP, what it stands for, how does the program works, like what qualifies, what the difference is between HIP versus bullying. We also talked about reinforcement to not only to educate not only kids but also the educators about empathy and acceptance to diversity in the classrooms or in the school in general. More parent workshops about emotional intelligence. Educators performing deeper investigations, whether they see some type of signs or red flags about bullying or conflicts, and also whether the kids do come and communicate something that could also be a red flag. Special education event classes. We would love to know more about like those opportunities that the town can offer our gifted children. Also, inviting industries around to develop extracurricular classes for our schools and or on-site, and this will be more like in all levels from K to like 12. Those are our main points. Who wants to go next?
Okay, we first of all started by saying that this was a lot of information, so it was almost too much to take it all in, so there wasn't necessarily anything that wasn't covered. We did talk about possibly rebranding the Ridge Wellness Days and WHAM's morning meetings that now take place in the afternoon to get more buy-in. We were talking about how to get the kids bought in. I know at Ridge a lot of kids don't come to school that day because they think of it as just a sleep-in. Make it work toward Ridge Gives Back. We talked about how to get feedback from non-vocal stakeholders because we felt like that was very important, maybe some sort of virtual suggestion box, but also the question was why don't they participate and speak up? So maybe doing more to figure that out. One thing that we talked a lot about was doing some type of project adventure type program for 6th graders as we talked about the transition from 5th to 6th grade. I think it's such a great program that the high school offers. And maybe something like that in lieu of a Camp Jumpstart that takes place during the school year where the kids are all participating rather than whoever's around and interested. One suggestion was change the makeup of the elementary schools to be 2 K-2 and 2 3-5 schools, which is a little bit drastic, so don't know if that's a possibility, but we talked about it. School start times came up, and then we also talked about the restorative discipline and how that is going to require a lot of planning, a lot of training, and also really requires an adequate number of supervisors in order to be effective. So that was what we have. Thank you.
Thank you. We talked about quite a few things at our table, but for the sake of everyone's time and just to be brief, I'll hit on kind of our main theme, which was inclusivity of special ed students and student special services. So one of our big topics was ICS, in-class support. Why is that only offered for kind of state-required classes. Why don't we offer it in other levels like AP, honors? Language classes as well. Why don't we offer it in other classes? We also talked about how special education students tend to be really limited in where they go to eat because they tend to be mostly kept with the same students and they don't get to know as many students, so including them in other areas where they eat. And we talked about even, like, for example, I teach forensic science, and that's one of the only electives for science available for special education population. So how do we kind of expand this and give students more opportunities? So like I said, we went through a lot of different things, but our biggest theme was including our special education population better.
We just go geographic.
Just to clarify, I love you, but just to clarify to the community here, before my husband divorced me, I teach Italian, so we don't have any class support in any of the foreign languages. So, to go back on what I said. Continuing the conversation, we're just going to jump in a lot of repetition here. One important thing is for inclusion is to send a language that is age appropriate for the elementary school students, because sometimes when they receive the survey and they don't understand the questions, they're not really able to answer those questions. So maybe be more mindful of the language and make the language more age appropriate for elementary children when we send out the survey, so we can include them. Going back on the transition to school, especially from the 5th grader to the 6th grader, great idea, replacing the jump start, but also focusing more on the social skills and more on the coping mechanism as much as possible. Going from one teacher to multiple teachers in WEM could be definitely traumatic for little children because they're still children, but developing the social skills, it's very important. More time, where we discuss also from a teacher point of view, more time with the supervisor. We know that they are now spread all over the place, but if we have more access as a teachers to them, that will help us, of course, create even more interdisciplinary connections. So my dream as a teacher in summer curriculum is to really write a curriculum in connection with other teachers to develop skills such as, essay across disciplines. So my students in AP have to write an essay, an argumentative essay. I would love to work with an AP English and learn from them how can they, what they're doing, the strategies, the graphic organizer, the questioning, the reading comprehension strategy that they use. So I have the ability to possibility to work with them. That will definitely reinforce learning from everybody. So more articulation across the department and more interdisciplinary connection. Berta, I want to work with you, girl.
I reported last time. Okay. So we have a lot of points. Our first one was a question about whether everyone's voice was actually heard, and trying to get participation of the diverse voices and more of a cross-section in future surveys. We were lauding our special education services, and we were talking about how some people feel that other issues are more pressing than DEI, and that there's a fear of bias in the results or the consultants. Kids seem to believe that two main groups were singled out among their populations. First, the Asians as being high achieving and being the target of those stereotypes. And then our LGBTQ plus population is targeted for bullying, which is consistent with national data. We felt that it was necessary to further address mental health concerns at this point with specific staffing, expanded programs, and support. We would increase the non-vocal input, participation without in-person attendance at meetings, continue to work on communication so that we can have discussions as outcomes without necessarily feeling like we need to have a product, a transaction, a solution on the issues all the time. We felt that there might be people who feel that social emotional learning or talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion or wellness days distracts from the academic focus in the schools, and how we could break out the message better. That those things are in fact really important parts of our school missions, and don't need to take away from other things in our schools, such as the learning. Because we know when we're on the ground that our students cannot learn when they are in crisis. We didn't necessarily always know what is causing those crises. It could be a school issue, it could be a family issue, but regardless, when they come to school, they need the support. We need to continue cyclical discussions on these sorts of things, build in more time, more BT Connect meetings that can address DEI, that this should probably be only the first of many discussions on these results so that we can continue to sit in cross sections and hear each other as much as possible, because we're particularly surprised that some still don't value DEI. Kids should be welcome and able to comment on the experience. We know they are welcome and they're not here tonight, which we would love to see them here because they are a really important part of this process. We would love to offer some parent education workshops on SEL and wellness, again, so that it's clear that it doesn't take away from any other part of our mission, and that our parents could opt into other services, whatever our students need. And we have more. We would love to have a dedicated space for students who need a lunch spot here at the high school. There is a lot of unstructured time in the lunches. And a lot of that unstructured time, studies show us, research shows that it leads to increased bullying, particularly for the populations that don't feel safe in those unstructured places. They want that direct supervision. And we would like to see more teacher training, particularly on inclusive language for our LGBTQ plus communities. Oh, there you go.
I'm just going to stay seated so I'm not too back to anyone. We talked a lot about sort of big ideas, and our main focus ended up sort of circling around to like how to continue to improve community. One, to make sure that as all community members, adults and kids, were holding each other accountable for proper behavior, as well as trying to empower each other to be making good decisions and being holding ourselves accountable for those decisions. We talked about having the time and support to try to work through all that, which would be some of the restorative justice work and help working through the different issues, and how sometimes that discipline consequences might not always be clear to everyone involved because of how they are handled and how we are addressing things individually, and it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of a model, which makes it a little more tricky to work out, but also hopefully a little bit more meaningful. We talked also about how the influence of technology has certainly had a negative impact on all these mental health issues, and how we can try to improve social interactions to get kids out of their phones and tablets to talk to each other more, which is, we acknowledge, is a much wider problem. And I think, anything else? We're good? Yep, that's what we got.
Hi. First of all the comments have been fabulous. This meeting has been very worthwhile, and I hope you do continue them. I'm going to be brief because there are a lot of other voices to be heard. We felt that among things that should have been addressed was to try to drive a higher response rate. We heard from sort of a smaller percentage of the community, and it would be great to have heard greater voices. But that being said, the comments, if everyone has had a chance to look at them, are more educational than any of the recommendations. It's really important to look at those comments and to understand and to try to incorporate that into whatever strategy goes forward. We were also concerned about the opportunity to measure and identify what appears to be a lot of anxiety, just generalized anxiety since COVID, that these kids are bringing into the school, and we all have to some extent, and how does that get addressed within this work? Around the theme, we're really interested in this aspect of disproportionality around staff or faculty, that why are teachers leaving the district? I mean, that's an important question. And are we asking the right questions? Maybe there are different ways, maybe bringing a third party to understand why there's attrition. And it's going to be hard to bring in, as you said, diverse candidates if we don't have a good brand. So to better understand, it's a great school system, but I think there can be things done to make people feel welcome regardless of their background. Things that surprised us within the survey was, is there truly a disproportionality issue with diversity in AP classes and honors classes? So that was a statement that the consultants made, but we're not clear, is there a disproportionality issue, and what is that? And what would be done to address that? And also, lastly, we think that there's an opportunity to, this table I think addressed it, that we use a lot of acronyms all the time, and half of the time people don't even know what they mean. And so as we try to drive work forward as a community, it's important to think about, we want these kids to thrive, we want them to have opportunity, we want them to feel valued. Those are words everyone understands, and just to keep the spirit of that objective and this work and not get too caught up in what's either considered woke or something else. At the end of the day, we just want these kids to be respected, valued, and to thrive. So that's it for us.
Okay, so in our group, we... Thank you. In our group, we... Wow. Thank you, Mr. Marquez. All right, I'm going to try to get through this now. Here we go. We framed our conversation into what we noticed and questions to consider. A lot has already been said. So just trying to edit here a little bit to new ideas. One was community pressure of taking higher level classes in terms of what we notice. Increase in anxiety and depression of our students. Kids not feeling that they're not going to fit in, afraid of not being accepted. And then questions to consider for us were, how do we reach all students, and particularly how do we hear from students that are a little bit quieter, maybe aren't as outgoing? How do we make sure that their voices are heard as well? And then changing that mindset of there's other pathways to success, not just those honor classes. And then finally, I think just how do we get kids to support each other? I think that's an important step too. All right, thank you, I'm done.
So we touched upon a lot of the same things everyone else did, so I'll give you the points that were not talked about. We discussed the continuity of language at the elementary levels, simplifying the rules as they did in Mount Prospect to be safe, be respectful, be kind, and what does that look like and feel like, and connecting the younger kids with the older kids, which is so important in our elementary schools especially. We talked a lot about early intervention at the elementary level for the social emotional. So as these kids grow, they're stepping into middle school with these tools that they need, and then into high school. So supporting the teachers, supporting the kids, supporting the staff at these early ages that we know can show change. We talked a lot about our wonderful teachers and staff and how we can show value and show support, and what little things can we do. And teaching parents about those little random acts of kindness, those nice emails to send, those little things you can send and do, and how we can do more of those things to make the atmosphere just a little nicer for our teachers and our staff, and say thank you and we appreciate you, and not just hear from us when we have something negative to say. And also with the parents, letting our parents know the value of being a positive role model for your kids, because a lot of times your children are just a mirror of you. So if your children are acting out in school and your children are having issues, if you look at the parent and maybe their social media account, you really don't have to look very far to where they got it. So maybe we need a little reminder for the adults on how to be models for our kids. Thank you. You guys in the back?
You don't have anything? Oh, yeah. Anybody else got it? I think we're good.
I'll help you sell that. Did we get over to this group? There we go.
Okay. A lot of stuff has been touched on. I'll go through point by point. Special projects, people needed more to relieve the assistant principals so they can actually focus on their core responsibilities. There's a sense that they get pulled away too much to other projects not central to their core responsibility. Discipline, consequences, it needs to be made more clear, just what you were saying before. Seems like the administration is afraid of being sued was the right word, and parents tend to lawyer up when their kids get in trouble, and we can't be afraid of, as a district, to fight that. There's also not enough mental health professionals, ESS, in the district, especially in the lower schools where generally the problems are first found. Ridge has a high academic stress level. Maybe there needs to be more discussion on non-academic achievement, vocational schools, and that college might not be for everybody. You don't need to overstress yourself, and you'll find your path someday. And we're wrestling with a way to kind of say this, but there's maybe more layers of academics. If you're at one extreme or the other extreme, you get a lot of focus and resources. There's that middle of the bell curve that some kids get left behind and don't get the focus. So I don't know if it's layering, go from honors AP to CP to maybe another level and then down, but kids learn in different ways, and just to have finite, honors AP and then CP might not be doing justice to a lot of these kids. And then there's a general sense that children aren't being excluded because of any characteristics, race, religion, or anything like that. So that's it.
I think I misunderstood the assignment. I thought we were talking about the results of the survey that went out, and just looking at the recommendations that were developed, the statistically significant quantitative findings form the basis of recommendations. For example, on page 14, the following sentence states that US2 considered local news articles, district feedback, emails from community members, focus group questions, and survey questions to analyze current SEL practices and determine the need for an increase or change to the current programming. And for this audit, it was unclear about the role that the quantitative survey played, if any, in the development of the recommendations presented. So, it's confusing to me only because I thought the purpose of the survey was to figure out, if there was an issue in our district. And I think we've opened up a can of worms. The bottom line is we need to be kind. We need to teach our kids to be kind. It doesn't matter what you are or what you believe. You just have to be kind. I had the luxury of having parents from different countries. They were born in Greece, they emigrated to Panama, and then we came here. So my parents have seen it all. And through their lens, that's how I learned. So I think that if we share our experiences, we all really are alike. The differences is what makes us interesting. But, we're here together. We are Team Basking Ridge. We're Team Ridge. I think we focus too much on this group and that group. I think that's a problem. And I got to tell you, having been a leader for Scouts, both boys and girls, you know what I see? I see a lot of little groups forming. And it starts with the elementary schools. I can tell you who comes from Cedar Hill. I can tell you who comes from Liberty Corner. I can tell you who comes from Mount Prospect. And I can tell you who comes from Oak Street. Honestly, I think the best solution, have K-1 and 2 in one school. All those kids are growing up together. Move it on to 3, 4, 5. They're still together. I remember distinctly all my friends from kindergarten, they're still my friends. And we all achieved very differently. And I have to tell you, knowing them from kindergarten has created the strongest bond. All of us look at each other appreciatively. I think if we tried that model, that would work. And we wouldn't be sitting here talking about these differences. Now, one of the things that our group focused on, there was a 6 through 12 statement. I'm sorry, thank you. Qualitative trends. it was specifically mentioned Indian, Asian, Black, Christian, Jewish, conservative values, and special needs also stated lack of inclusivity. I don't think that was the point of the survey, but that's what came out. And there were qualitative answers that I don't think were addressed. So I really think we should go back and look at those things, because I don't think there's any action that can be taken based on the survey results. That's all I have to share.
Did you have any notes you want to share? Any takers? Okay.
I'll try not to say anything that's already been said. Okay. Hi. I feel like the mass singer back here. We talked generally about having more social emotional learning around building confidence, coping, regulating emotions, and conflict resolution. We talked about how we teach our kids to be upstanders, but that's really very difficult if we're not building their confidence and connection with each other. We talked about having parent education on having those difficult conversations that you talked about, and are giving that training to your staff, because we have to have them at home too, and that's hard. We did talk a lot about middle school. In the middle school, I feel like we need a lot more of getting to know you time. I think it's assumed that a lot of kids have a lot of friends, and that's just not the case. So having more getting to know you times to help students connect in every single class, because they don't travel as a group. Every time that they go to a new period, they have to have a whole new set of students that they're communicating with and working with, and that can be difficult for some. Sorry, I want to stick with middle school for a second. Lots of concerns around middle schoolers using really negative, derogatory terms, especially around gay. Like, you're so gay. I thought that we got past that, and we really just haven't. So I hear it, I see it, I address it when I see it, but I know it's being used. So how do we address that as a community? How are we engaging and folding in our introverts and students who don't follow social nuances, students who don't necessarily fit the mold, so to speak, or that just are outside of the box kinds of kids? So how are we kind of capturing them? With regard to harassment and bullying, this is specific to WAMs. I'm not even sure who to call or how to address kids don't want it. So I don't know how to address that and get support for that at the middle school level, especially without having that child feel that then they're singled out, or then there might be some retaliation. So that was really specific to middle school. Oh, and then the idea around student leaders, having more opportunities, especially now post-COVID, for student leaders to help younger kids transition from elementary to middle school, and then same thing up into the high school. We thought sometimes their peers have more credibility than their parents at that age. That's it.
All right. Paul, are you up? You're speaking? Thank you.
Hi, everybody, from back here. Just a couple things that we felt either hadn't been said or we're just kind of reiterating in our own words. Basically, in a lot of talk, we concluded that we're a public school institution, and that means public education, and that means including and welcoming everyone. So we had a exclamation point with that. And I think in thinking about that, we talked about really the need to come to some basic agreements about what it means to include everybody in the community, because I think there's a variety of ideas about what that ultimately means when it comes to diverse groups in our community. We talked a little bit about the clubs at the high school, and just said in our talk to ensure that there aren't barriers to students in terms of finding out about the clubs or getting involved in any of those clubs, because we know that was mentioned in the survey. We just had a ditto for all the SEL stuff that was out there, that we agree with that as well, and the need for that. And we talked a little bit about the restorative or the remediating behavior. We do a lot of that at the elementary school, and that's part of what we do as administrators. And so if there are less administrators, then it'll be harder to do that remediation that we think is so important, that in this survey seemed to be mentioned, particularly at the middle and high school. We start that at the elementary school, but it's going to be hard to keep doing that with less of us around. So that's it.
Hi, everyone. So we're back here in, like, I don't know where, but we haven't heard a lot of what you've said, so I apologize in advance if I'm being repetitive. We can't see or hear anything. We took a view of something missing from the survey perspective as viewing things more through a lens of privilege and how that attaches very differently. There are children in our town, for example, with significant financial barriers. Some of that comes with educational barriers, parents who may not have finished high school, let alone gone to college, or having doctorate degrees. We also have an increasing population of non-native English speakers among our children as well as their parents. So as we're having conversations about sending curriculum home in backpacks for parents to teach it to their children, how does that work if parents don't speak the language and children don't speak the language either? We don't have the resources to translate into the dozens of dialects, I guess I'll say. I don't know how many it is exactly that our students speak. So that's a significant concern we have and something we want to be very mindful of moving forward, that although the haves are often the people who speak at the meetings, there's a lot of people who are working very hard overseas, different hours, single parents, with their partners who may be assigned to totally different time zones or continents, who are just struggling to get by and maybe aren't participating. The other thing I think that we haven't heard touched on, I know a lot was said about stress and about mental health, but really is the difference generationally in the conversation about mental health. I'm a Gen Xer, married to a millennial who's potentially listening to this and stomping his feet because I called him a millennial. And, we're talking about children who've been born in the 2000s who have a totally different approach to mental health. For me, it was always something you were ashamed to talk about if you were depressed or anxious or something like that, right? But kids today are very open about mental health, at least for the most part. So we need to teach our parents to be better at having those conversations, at making it safe for children to express concerns and recognizing red flags and all of that. Now, I don't have an easy solution for it, but it's basically we're not even speaking the same language at this point, and that's a risk factor for our children, especially as we know we don't have enough counselors to go around in any of our schools at any of the levels here. And then one example that we came up with is Jumpstart, I think represents all of the concerns around this, right? Like the Jumpstart program, I'll just share as the mom of a 5th grader, she is anxious as heck about going to WAMS. There's so much conversation about how scary it is, how different it is, how you have to be at the top of your game. So she's already having mental health and stress concerns related to that transition, but it's a half day for 3 weeks. How does a working parent, maybe working single parent, manage to get their child picked up from Jumpstart, to be able to go someplace else after that in transition, right? Maybe you don't speak the language. You don't even know what Jumpstart is. You don't even know that it's important or the role that it plays. We have 5th graders stressed, mental health issues already appearing in terms of anxiety. So it's just one of those things that seems like it might be an easy fix. Maybe it's 2 weeks, full day, or I don't know, something else like that, that we could be thinking more mindfully about including things by looking through that lens of privilege. So that's, I think, everything, Yolanda. Did I do roughly okay?
Want to jump in on anything? We good? Did I get everybody? Could I just have a hand raised? Did we miss anybody that needs to? Did we get all groups? Okay. Yeah. So we usually try to schedule about an hour and a half, about a half an hour for presentation, a half an hour for time talking together, and then a half an hour to share out. So please make sure that you leave your notes page on your table for tonight so that we're able to collect everything. As I mentioned earlier, we will take all of these, turn them into minutes, and publish the minutes when we do the minutes of this board meeting. All the comments will be included on a separate document. I usually link it as like an attached document. Obviously, I'm not going to repeat comments, but things that are shared will show up at least once throughout the minutes when we collate all of your input. So I appreciate your help with all that. So I know we are still having, this is an actual Board of Ed meeting, So I know that Mr. Molinari mentioned earlier too that if there was any other comments, because we did have to cut things off a little bit to get this started, we could take care of that at this point in time. We have the ability to just pass the mic. So if somebody has something, we'll be happy to do that now. You could just state your name and address and share. Thanks.
Kara Otilio Cooper from Mayflower Drive. And I just wanted to quickly thank the whole board and particularly Mrs. Light. I moved here 2.5 years ago, and I have been waiting 2.5 years to hear a finance committee report like that. And I know you put in so much time to do that. And I really thank you. It's exactly what I want to hear. It's very important information. I'm so happy, God bless, that we have a CPA on the finance committee. I don't know why we had to wait a year for that. And I just really need you to know that. Thank you very much.
Just sign in for me. The traveling public comment clipboard. Anybody else? I'll come to you.
I had a more formal statement, but I'm going to save it for the next meeting. I just want to say I was here for myself, but also I'm the Ridge co-president of the PTO, Alicia Martini. So we just wanted to, we wrote a letter to the board. We were going to read it tonight. We've sent it already to the board, but like I said, I'll save it for the next meeting. But we just want to say we are in total support of all the assistant principals. That's one of the primary reasons why we decided to come tonight, and that ours was specifically, obviously, towards Ms. Howarth. We need her back. We want her back. And I'm sure all these schools will feel the same way. And so, like I said, we'll do a more formal statement next time, but that was the purpose. I already had it.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Jennifer Hamilton, 53 Conncect Street. I am also part of a PTO from Oak Street. I have 2 children, so I'm a mother, but I'm also a substitute teacher at Oak Street a lot, so I just wanted to kind of lend my support as well, and I like that the budget isn't finalized. I think it's important, and I just wanted to add that as a mother and a teacher. It really contributes to me feeling safe as well, knowing that I have a lifeline that understands these kids, that knows them because he's there on a regular basis. He knows when something happens at the school, whether this is a one-off, whether this is an ongoing problem, and that's not something that we could ever have if we had people, you know, kind of coming and going and lots of emails going around. So I just wanted to voice that opinion as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelly Target. I'm guessing many of you know me because I created a Facebook group the other day for purposes of sort of galvanizing parents to understand more about the question of assistant principals. And I so appreciate those of you who've come out tonight, hopefully to raise your voices and your hands and speak up on this subject if it's important to you. What I would say is I've lived in town for probably 6 or 7 years now. I want to first of all start by saying thank you largely to the administrators and to the teachers who have made this school district what it is. I can't say that I've contributed to that, and so we all really frankly owe you a thank you for making it one of the top districts in the state and therefore in the country. That said, you know, I'm a mom. I have 2 kids who are in elementary school. I'm a working mom. I am a property owner. I'm a taxpayer. I have voted in every election since I've been in town, and I will continue to do so. And I'm also a PTO president, and I think tonight you're going to hear largely from PTO presidents until the next meeting when we invite our parents to come and speak with all of you. And what we're hoping for is some transparency on this decision. Liberty Corner first heard of the idea to remove our beloved Mrs. Lawrence in October. And it came out after a parents advisory committee meeting, like a couple of days. There was no mention of it, and then all of a sudden we were hearing rumors that this was going to happen and that it was basically a done deal. There was a lot of anxiety that we had, and we wrote a really lengthy email that unfortunately never got acknowledged or responded to, where we listed out our concerns, right? Among those concerns are the assistant principals are vital. I've been at Liberty Corner School and seen Dr. Oliver on rollerblades, frankly, when the admins are out or out to lunch. He's answering phone calls, he's buzzing people in, he's breaking up the fight, he's doing all of those things, and it is impossible to do that without a backup administrator. And frankly, I don't think it's feasible. I think we risk losing the wonderful talent that we've amassed here in town, both our principals and our vice principals, who are such an essential part of our community. You know, the argument has been advanced that we used to not have this model, right? We used to have just a principal, but that was 15 or 20 years ago. And elementary students today are not the kids of 15 or 20 years ago. I know I mentioned Mr. Markarian at a meeting, right? These kids are coming out of COVID, they're traumatized, and you said we don't get to say COVID anymore, but I'm saying COVID. My kids are still traumatized from COVID, socially, emotionally. They need additional support. They need consistency. They need to see Mrs. Lawrence there and know that she's a person they can go to whom they trust when they have a problem. Additionally, you know, if you care about money and that's your driving factor and you maybe have more conservative principles, there are districts that have made the decision to revert to a principalship only and not have a vice or assistant principal. They've lost their National School of Excellence designations. They've lost their blue ribbon seals. Property values decrease when that happens. That's what happens to us. That's what we're facing at this point. So I think the decision is, I'm glad to hear it hasn't been made, Mr. Markarian. I saw your email. I think the time is now, though, for parents to speak up before the decision is made. If you don't support this, if you're willing to pay an extra $1 a year in property taxes or whatever it is to have assistant principalships across the schools, then I think, you know, now's the moment to speak up, and we'll see you again at the next meeting. But hopefully some transparency will come forth between now and then. Thank you. I forgot to say 121 Annan Road. I'll write it on the sign-in sheet. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, thank you. Mr. Molinari, where are you? I'll turn the mic over to you, sir.
Motion to adjourn? Ms. Light? We're adjourned.